walking in the Spirit and anger, sin and the devil. We're going to do all of those. Ephesians chapter 4, verses 26 to 27 says this: Be angry and do not sin, and do not let the sun go down on your anger, and give no opportunity to the devil. You know, Jesus remains a very, very popular figure in culture and the blogs and so forth. And even despite our society's refusal to acknowledge the biblical roots of Christ and Christianity. So unfortunately, however, Jesus is often respected for the wrong reasons. Now, some people see Jesus from the 1960s as peace and love and a power person. There's all sorts of various images all through the ages, and Jesus never gets angry at sinners. And yet, when we look at the New Testament paints a very different picture of Jesus. The true biblical Christ does not get angry at sin. In fact, he does. He gets angry at sin of people and of disciples. In Matthew 16:21, I made a mistake there. He does get angry at sin. How could it be otherwise? Jesus is perfectly righteous, and holiness cannot endure the presence of transgression without responding in wrath. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 22. So the Lord's anger is always righteous anger. So when we put on Christ, walking in the Spirit, in a life of discipleship, does not mean we're never allowed to get angry. In fact, there are times when we must get angry at very heinous sin. Paul presupposes this truth in the passage that we read today, for he tells us to be angry without sinning. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 26. So anger may be sinful or righteous, and the solution to sinful anger is not to refuse ever to be angry. The answer instead is to be mad only at appropriate occasions. Still, it's exceedingly rare for human anger not to transgress God's will. So there are three ways in which anger can be sinful, okay? The first one is when our anger arises from a slight cause, or no cause at all whatsoever, or at least from some private offence. A short temper, for example, that refuses to overlook minor flaws manifests sinful anger. 1 Peter 4:8 tells us that. Our anger is also sinful when we go beyond proper bounds and move into excessive behaviour. Fallen anger, not righteous wrath, is disproportionate to the degree of the offence. Matthew 18:21 tells us that. And then finally, we sin when our anger, which ought to have been directed against ourselves and against sin, is turned against other people. So let us not get mad at the speck in another person's eye and ignore the log in our own eye. Sinful anger certainly gives a foothold for the devil, but even believers can degenerate into unrighteousness if we're careless, according to Ephesians 4:26. So consequently, it's very important to diffuse anger as soon as possible. Dealing with our anger before we go to bed prevents it from festering into something worse in verse 27 of Ephesians 4. If sinful anger can give the devil a foothold in our churches and in our relationships with our friends and our family, then diffusing anger is an essential part of walking in the Spirit. Insofar as it depends on us, we must strive to make peace with those who are angry with us. We must also be discerning about our anger to make sure it is justified and not sinful. And as we do these things, we strive back against the work of Satan and we walk in the Spirit.